Yo, have you heard of LinkedIn Learning? If you haven't, LinkedIn Learning is an American massive open online course provider. It provides video courses taught by industry experts in a variety of subjects. Now, why am I sharing this? I'm sharing this because Living Corporate is in partnership with LinkedIn Learning to provide diversity, equity, and inclusion courses. Listen, if you're trying to be a better ally, you want to understand better diversity, equity, inclusion strategies, or you just want to learn how to be a better leader, you got to check out the courses on LinkedIn Learning. So check it out. You can do it one of two ways. You can click the link in the show notes, or you go to LinkedIn Learning and you search Living Corporate. Again, link in the show notes, or go to LinkedIn Learning and search Living Corporate. I'll see you over there.
Welcome, everyone, to the new group chat. I am your host, Vonda Page, and this show on the Living Corporate Network is called Radical Change with Vonda Page. And for those of you who have attended or who are not familiar, the Living Corporate Network, one of the entire goals is to really amplify the experiences of black and brown professionals at work, to be able to share our experiences and to be able to, relate with each other in a way that addresses our, unique needs, right, and our unique circumstances. And so what I do on Saturdays is I bring on thought leaders, technologists, founders, CEOs, strategists, people who are driving conversations, people who are driving action, people who are driving change. And so I am super excited to welcome Farzad to my show today. You are one of those people, first of all, who has, I just have to say, like, just a badass LinkedIn, because you say stuff to make people upset. And, it's okay, right? And you do it, and we do what we do. And what I really love is all the conversation around capitalism and helping people trying to understand, right, what the impact of that is. So, before we, get it going, I just want to say hi, Ashley, how you doing? And, just check in.
Thanks, Wanda. First off, it's an honor to be here. We've had some great conversations, and I'm looking to kind of delve deep into some of the things that we've been talking about. So thank you. I'm feeling good. Like I'm ready to go. Like I know that we have like a really, really cool set of topics to discuss and go over. And so I'm excited.
So what I want to talk about first is, when we think about LinkedIn, people, or any social media, people have a couple of ideas, right? One idea people have is that you can't talk politics at work. Another idea people have is that, we're not supposed to talk about things that the billionaires and the rich people don't want us to talk about. So I want to talk about how you even said, you know what, the heck with all that. These are the things that need to be discussed, and these are the things I'm going to talk about.
So that's a grech question. So I think a lot of that has to do with our socialization into where we, like our quote unquote place in all of this in the big picture, right? The big wigs, the billionaires, the people who have power define what that is, and create these atmospheres where you can't do this because you're in this situation. Well, that's not true. Like in my trainings and in my discussions, I talk about these open systems frameworks. Like your organization, you're all part of society. You're all part of human history, right? It is all part of a greater and global society as well. Like, let's not forget that, right? Like, we kind of contextualize things, and we're doing things here in the United States, and they're doing things over there in China or Russia or Japan, Brazil, et cetera. Where it all, like, we're in a globalized society, so it all influences one another. But these types of conversations that are had, like, don't do this and don't do that at work, that is designed specifically to prevent you from organizing and liberating yourselves. Like that is a deliberately planned out thing so that you don't recognize your own power at work, right? So when you recognize that you're a human being, so it's all open, right? It's all part of a fabric of greater society. So I myself am bringing in 38 years of my life into this particular conversation, into the work that I do. I'm bringing in my parents, experiences as well, my ancestors' experiences, and from this conversation, I'm going to take knowledge and go on, right? And I'm going to take this experience with me, into the future. Your organization does the same thing. Open it up. It's an open system. There's the idea of it being closed and segregated from the rest of society is a false piece of propaganda. So, it's designed to prevent you from recognizing your power in the workplace. So, talk about politics, talk about your salaries, be open and honest about where you are. And so obviously you don't want to say things that are harming people, say things in a manner that are authentic and, to your lived experiences and your understanding of the world. But obviously you're not, that doesn't give you open the floodgates to start saying things that are really harmful to certain groups of people. That's not what I'm talking about, right? There's that line. So, but when you're trying to build solidarity at work, when you're trying to build, mutual understanding and kind of, start to organize and take action and then demand more power from your institutions, society, your political structures, et cetera, you have to talk. You have to talk about your situation and your experience. Yep.
And the thing is, you have to also recognize that you are going to get pushback. You are going to get whatever, hate tweets, hate mails, people trying to police your language, trying to tone police what you say. You shouldn't say this, not all this and not all these and not all of us and not this, right? But you have to, and this something for me is just getting more and it's strengthening in me, right? This resolve to don't worry about that, right? Because literally, what are all the billionaires going to do? Do we think they're on LinkedIn all day trying to say, okay, what's Farzin saying? What's Vonda saying about, literally they're not doing that, right? They've created algorithms, right? So that to flag certain things, right? To keep them from getting widely dispersed. But that's the other reason that we need to have conversations with each other, right? So even think about how we met on LinkedIn, right? I just reached out because I'm always just wow, this stuff is just so good. And then you always give that context that helps you think, deeper, right? And before we got on camera, to share with everybody, I was telling Farzin, I grew up reading the newspaper when I was 5 years old. So I didn't go to kindergarten like a lot of kids. And so my grandfather told me every day I had to read the newspaper. So I read the Philadelphia Inquirer, which was used to be written on about a 7th grade level. I had read sections of the Wall Street Journal, right, which was written on the 10th grade level. And in the evening, I would read the New York Times. He would have me read Section A of the New York Times. So reading, right, Section A of the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, Philadelphia Inquirer, right, is really going at a young age. It helps to set that stage. So think this is 1974, 1975, right? When I'm reading and I'm starting to learn, right, about capitalism and learn about business. And I'm reading about Ford and, all of these old companies. And I remember even watching television shows, right, where you see these people with these big houses and big kitchens and backyards saying, well, what kind of jobs do these people have? And, oh, I want to live like that, right? And so that mindset and all of that gets built into you very, very early.
Yeah, that's the whole thing with capitalism, right? It has to produce a culture in order to sustain it, right? So what happens is, and I want to be very clear, and I've said this on LinkedIn before, and I want to be very clear that my personal belief, and I believe this is, this is true to me, is that capitalism is an extension of colonialism, right? So everything's built on hierarchy. So that's what capitalism is. First off, like, think of the hierarchy. So what happens is, those at the top, they create structures to embed their own power and wealth and ability to generate wealth and extract labor, land, and resources from other people. Usually they activate ones that look and sound like them to justify so that they can harm people in other groups, right, from faraway lands. And, as colonialism eventually becomes capitalism, things like that. So it's all about extraction. It's about extracting things from other people and exploiting things. But when you do things like that, right, eventually it gets, it weighs on you, right? So you have to figure out ways to justify all of this. One way of doing it is being like, hey, bootstraps, I did all this. I worked hard. I came from nothing. And now look at me, like you can too, when we all know that that's not true, because if that were true, then there would be like wealth would be like abundant all over the place instead of like a few handful of people controlling the majority of the flows of wealth on this planet. The second
and we would all look like our population, right? We would look like how we all look, right? So right. That means in America, there'd be 13% Black people, right, in positions in charge. There'd be 20%, Latin people in charge. There'd be 15% Asian people. There'd be 7% Middle East. If it, right, it would be aligned to the population, right? But it is in no way like that, not even close.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because racial capitalism creates it has to have some pressure release valves. It has to provide access for a few people to come in, for others to be like, oh, they did it too. Like it's not my race or like my gender, my ethnicity. Everybody has the ability to do that, right? So there are these pressure release. It's a very complicated, very advanced system to be of control. So going back to my earlier comment, the second way of doing it is dehumanizing others, right? These, with colonialism, it was these individuals are backwards. You mentioned savage. The term savages was used to kind of describe colonized peoples. There's this relationship with God where Europeans were closer to God than, you create these mythologies, what we call capitalist culture. And it bleeds into everything that we do. So, the people who have, they deserve it. The people who don't deserve it so that whole conversations about not divine or savages ends up becoming, oh, you're lazy or you're just not dedicated and things like that. So these mythologies are not just society. They show up in very easily determined processes in your workplace as well, right? So the conversation then is how do I counteract these the mythologies? And so you have to really think about when some of these guys are speaking, some of these people are speaking about their success or millennials are this way or Gen Z's this way. That's why they're not So you have to think about where that person stands in their privilege, what power do they hold, and what is this statement, that this claim that they're making, what is it designed to do? What is the outcome of it? Is it to really talk about organically their experience in life and things? No, it's designed for a purpose, right? It is what propaganda is, right? It's designed to kind of create and then change behavior and then change understanding, change framing. So always think about when you hear, these types of things, always thinking about what is this exact, what are you trying to get at here? What are you trying to do with this particular piece of quote unquote knowledge that you're trying to share with us, which is actually propaganda, which is actually designed to embed itself in our minds for us to be complacent so that these individuals can continue retaining their power and wealth.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the propaganda that happens, even if we think about these business platforms, right? These business social media platforms, the propaganda that happens, the list of the whatever best companies for diversity, best companies for this, the best whatever. The one of the CEOs posted a post either last night or yesterday, And they said that some company awarded them best CEO for diversity if they gave them $1,000. And it just made me laugh. And it made me think about, what you and I were going to be talking about today, right? So the propaganda, right, behind what they want us to believe and think is really interesting,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's really funny. Like the way I frame it usually is this way. So they're like, in all of this work, there's like, I look at it in three separate tiers. One is like you can in society, you can, kind of parallel that with the conservative movement at this point. Like there are your active detractors, right? There are active people who are resisting. They don't want to hear it. They're fine with their particular position in life. And they don't want change. And they don't want it because they feel like there's going to be a loss to their specific societal and socioeconomic power. So I'm not concerned with them. Like, that it's very hard to move from that to kind of a liberatory mindset, like a liberation mindset, because you have, right? Usually people have a lot. And those that, that's not always true, because like there's still the propaganda that goes through, and some certain people who are less, well off sent to support them. But I typically don't kind of like try to, hey, let me tell you about how life is and change you. So there's usually that group. And then there's the people who are interested in, on the opposite spectrum, people who are interested in revolutionary change, like ground up. Our system isn't working for us. Our system isn't like, we have to really uproot these systems and replace them with things that are systems that are egalitarian, that benefit all, that do a lot of the work collectively for us, so we don't have to have leaders that come in and assume so much risk and responsibility to change things and eventually get killed, or eventually fall out of favor with society and their lives destroyed, right? So like there's a lot of weight, but if we distribute that power and responsibility and action among the people, that's the revolutionary change. So those are in the middle. Okay. This is where I see DEI in this very moment, diversity, equity, inclusion. There is the group that can be most associated with the liberal movement in this country, which is more closely aligning with the liberalism of Canada and Europe. And so it's like, these neoliberal mindsets. So you believe in capitalism, but you believe in a softer form of capitalism where people have better conversations and are, quote unquote, just nicer to one another. It's not about revolutionary change, right? It's about surface level change, so that it gives off an appearance or veneer of like progress, but there's no you're still swimming in a swamp of like problems, right? Like, but you're being nice to one another in that swamp, right? The system sucks and you're okay with the system, but you're trying to be like, oh yeah, don't say that to that person. So in theory, that like you think, okay, so yeah, we want to be more inclusive, right? But without that like equity and justice, you're only going to get minor change. So you have to liberate both your identity and show up authentically to work, and you have to liberate your physical production, your labor, your wealth. And so like those two things. So like the liberal group is more interested in the liberation of labor through conversations, through like, very soft approaches. Whereas like the revolutionary group is like, let me fix this system and we'll have better outcomes in the future for identity. And so like those types of very performative things that you see, like, oh yeah, this person won an award for diversity, or this person being like, those are in the very middle, right? Yeah, that's cute, right? But what are you doing to dismantle the structures that are harming us, right? So that is where I see a lot of like DEI existing in the corporate space. I'm not putting a blanket sort of stamp on the entire industry. There are people that I know that are doing incredible work in really addressing systems and structures of pain and oppression. But there's also a lot of people that are interested in the paycheck and are willing to flow with the trends of capitalism, but softened capitalism, like, conscious capitalism, which is an oxymoron to me.
It definitely is. It is. And what I think is so interesting, like when you're talking about the people in the middle, right? The nice, the, passive aggressive, those are those same people working in HR that know that Black women are getting paid 65 cents on a dollar, that, Asian women are getting paid, 79 cents on a dollar, white women getting paid 81 cents. Like they know, right? But nobody does anything. And so I think it's really interesting, that juxtaposition between the people who they know. And I've been reading, somehow yesterday I think it was after you and I talked, I got into a James Baldwin day. And I started listening and watching old James Baldwin interviews. And you can't listen to James Baldwin and come out and not be mad and not ask questions that people don't want to hear, right? And so, like, asking those questions, back to even what you said earlier about, sharing things on LinkedIn, like about salary, right? And about experiences, right? And even women who I've interviewed right on the show who have had experiences, in corporate America, right? Where they actually wrote books and interviewed, people around those experiences. And everything always ties back to what we talked about in the very beginning, the whole capitalism, the framework of it. And so what I want to do is I want to start helping people think about it in the standpoint of we are not powerless, right? In anything, but we have been conditioned, right, to believe that we are. It's like they got us where they want us. Right. You know that expression, like they got us right where they want us. They got us brainwashed and so dependent on that need to try to climb and try to, consume and get more, right? Because like we talked about before we got on screen, I said, I had this whole theory. I was thinking about it this morning, probably because I was reading James Baldwin yesterday, the whole thing around, they want us, all of us in this country, all of us that are in capitalistic systems, to strive for this, to your point earlier, right? This mythical place, right? Of you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And if you work hard, you can get this too. When literally they know it's not true. And I believe we also know that we can't be a Musk or a Bezos. Don't we know that? So then what makes us try to conform and fit in and navigate these systems that are not designed for equity to even exist at any point? And even to what Jahari said in the chat, about HR being police, right? To protect the capital, right? And preserve that disinheritance. So they are that extension, right? So if we think about policing, right, from its origins, from slavery to now, and it has moved into every aspect of our society, but we all know that the corporate sector, the education sector, politics, it's all a reflection. And it's not, you cannot unseparate any of it, because it's all in place to support capitalism, including white supremacy is in place to support capitalism. So how do we help people to start to, unwrap that in their minds, right? In an actionable way? Because I feel like so many people now are just saying, I know, but I feel like it's kind of like with climate change. If we don't do something, there's no planet B. Where are we going?
Right. I want to kind of go back to what you mentioned. I think it's a super important point, because this is something I'm struggling with. And this is a big, I don't know. I don't know how we have possibly gotten to this place in our society where healthcare is abysmal. Our climate is like going, like we're at near irreversible trends. Like, how did we get here? Like, because like every philosophy at some point describes like the ability to for us to finally come to the realization to achieve mass consciousness, to achieve like the ability to realize where we are at this point. It is baffling to me how we in this country are still, after hundreds of years, still listening to those in power, and then not like achieving any sort of liberation. And my theories behind that are that, we became so wealthy, and then we became so advanced in our technology and our ability to produce, that we created very, very complicated and layered systems of propaganda, so that people kind of think that they have the ability to reach these heights. And so like the pressure release valves were a little bit like more advanced than other countries. And so like, by that, I mean, like some people were able to kind of make it, right. So like there were some certain things like, and stocks kind of played a role, and bonds and like investments where people kind of attained some degree of wealth independent from labor. Right. So there was some of these pressure release valves were a little bit more advanced and distracting than other countries. So I believe that we're we're the most propagandized country on the planet. Other countries, that their propaganda machines are very, very simple relative to ours. Of course, that's a big generalization. But anyhow, so that is what we're fighting against. It is a layered and complex system. And it's very hard to achieve mass consciousness in that. It's very hard to achieve solidarity among groups, because what the leaders at the top are doing are pitting one group against another, and so like it's you're at a loss because this group is at a gain, and it's traditional values that are being challenged, and all these conversations that are popping up. That let's talk about that. Where it's that conversation is inherently anti-revolutionary, anti-liberation, right? So what do we do, right? I think and I honestly don't know, but like my thought process behind this is stop, look around you, and realize where you are, right? Are you any step closer to anything that these people have been promising you, right? Are we any step closer? Are we actually further along, further back, right? So the first step in consciousness, you don't have to read philosophy, like European or like Indian, Chinese, Latin American philosophy at all to be able to recognize that you are not living your best life, right?
You gotta let me pause on that. I have to pause because, that you just said so much. Everything from the layers of propaganda, because as soon as you said that, right, I'm like, and then I'm starting to think about what they are, because not even are there layers, but all of those layers have these algorithmic hierarchies that are inherently racist that we all know, right? And every time people act like it's stuff racist, it cracks me up. But last night when I was listening to James Baldwin, one of the interviews where he said, I think it's probably one of his most listened to or, most seen, where he says, I don't know if the school board is racist, but I know that the books they give my kids, right, are nonsense and trash, blah, 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 right? I don't know if the real estate industry is racist, but I know that I can't get a mortgage and neither can people that look like me. So he goes through this thing, and then he says, as if you're a white person, the question is, do you want to be treated like a black person, right? Would you be treated like a black person? And if the answer is no, then you know that you already know. So when you asking this question, you say, look around, right? And you say, do you have these things that people promised you? Whether it's, if you vote for me, I'm going to shut off the border, right? Whether you, buy this, you're going to lose 30 pounds in 30 days.
Sure.
or whether get this cream and, you're going to go from age 70 to looking 27 overnight. So whatever it is, right, whether it's that kind of propaganda but for people to be able to look around, observe where they are, and then say, somebody is lying to me and things are not what I thought about, right? And so that's just deep. That is deep. So my friend Maureen said that somebody asked her on Tuesday if Maureen has been her name or if it was her Americanized name. And she said, that hurt her feelings because that's an insult for her parents, her educated Nigerian parents, right? And then the person started pretending it wasn't my intention to hurt you. First of all, when it comes to names, that thing is so deep. And Maureen, my sister, I'm so sorry that happened to you. And I'm going to Nigeria with Maureen, me and my daughter, because I'm 87% Nigerian, which I found out on one of those ancestry thingies. But just think about people. And so one of the things we've learned here is that if we don't believe people are right, we other everyone. So they're going to say to my friend here, that's her American. Like, why can't she have any name? And who owns names? And what is this European centric thing, to your earlier point, right? I mean, and whether you take it from the Christianity standpoint or whatever, but this thing of their superiority when literally they stole everything that they have.
Yeah. I mean, Europe wouldn't have developed without theft, right? Like we're trading in that theft, right? Even like, I talk to nonprofits about this, like you're doing good work, but you're still trading and you're still accepting donations that were acquired through wealth that was attained through colonization, through the theft of land, labor, and capital, human beings and their labor, right? Literal human beings, the sale of them, the sale of their labor, the underpayment eventually of their labor. Like, so, yeah. And Maureen, thank you for sharing that. First off, have a wonderful trip. That sounds amazing. But yeah, I mean, that whole thing about hurt feelings and like, the outcome of the resistance to that. It's exactly the same things, so thank you because like that is what I'm talking about on a very local scale. So the response is, the response from the quote unquote liberal would be, oh, I hurt your feelings. Let's have a conversation about it. Like let's talk this through. Let me tell you what I'm coming from. Whereas like you were doing double the work to be like, look, I was harmed, right? I don't want to talk about this, right? I don't like, get off me, basically. First off, you should know not to say ridiculous things like that, right? And so that's what the system has done, right? The system has created the conversation. There is role for dialogue and communication in revolutionary process. Of course there is. It has to happen. We have to get people to recognize where they are. And through that, that's the medium is communication, right? But then there's the whole different thing about let's have the conversation because what that does is it dilutes the issue. So somebody's harmed and somebody's like the person in power, then you come as equals and you have to navigate that situation. If you're from a position of harm, you have to talk about it eloquently and elegantly in whatever, kind of constructions that those in power have created to be able to gatekeep the conversation. And then you have to levy that into the conversation with objectivity, with dispassion, and then have a outcome, right? Let's talk about it. And then at the end, it's watered down. I'm still hurt, but this person may know a little bit, but I have to also change my behavior too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so. It's deep. This is deep stuff. I mean, it's really deep. And I love what Jahari said, right? About, we have to do anti-propaganda, and here's what I wonder too. So because I'm a news consumer, I read very fast and I consume and read a lot. So I use, and I hate amplifying people's tools, but I use the red one and just to aggregate, right? And then I can separate out world politics and technology and then science, because that's how I kind of, organize, how I consume my news. And so Jahari's point about, a new pedagogy, right? Because in the anti-propaganda, because that's what we're doing. We have to help people understand that those systems and those structures that are out there, they are all against you. Like, they are not trying to help you. I think about, there's a show, it's the continuation of the show Blackish. And the producer, Kenya, has another show on Netflix called Black AF. I might have told y'all about it, but I love that show. But one of the things I like about it is the theme song is it's a rap song, and it says, "You're either with me or against me, though." And I think about that, right? Capitalism is not for us. Like, it's entirely against us, right? And so we are all part of it, and we're in it, and we are operating in it because that's the framework, right? With our society is set up. But you're talking about, and even Jahari, what you're doing and things that people are doing, right? We're talking about shifting this whole paradigm. In that conversation of helping people understand that you have power, and you have to start to, at wherever you are, you got to start putting it into place, right? You don't have to keep on scrounging and scrapping, right, after the man's bag, right? You can get your own bag, but I think if we work together on a collective bag of health, of safety, of clean air and water, and of our basic needs, right, then we'll all have so much more than that. Because it's not like our country, if we just only talk America even, it's not like we're lacking in resources, right? What is it that we throw away something about? Don't we throw away either 40% of all of the food here? Isn't it 40%? It's a big, giant number. And I know I heard in some places it's 60%. But if you think we throw away 40% of food, but it's 30 million hungry children under age 5 in America, under age 5, that don't make sense. So talk about like what those frames look like in actuality, like what would it look like? So let's take a company X has, let's take the number 10,000 employees. Let's take a number like that. So company X has 10,000 employees. It's a good company. It's an influential company. People think company X is great, but we know, right, that the power is concentrated at the top. The whole C-suite has 8 people in it. It has one person that's not white, and it has one person that's not a cis male. But the structure is what it looks like all across all of our corporate structures and organizations. How do we start thinking about that deconstruction of that thought, even of how, those frameworks look?
Yeah. So that's a great question. And to get to that, I think I'm going to go into two major philosophical points and then kind of go into that. So one, I think that this mythology of like capitalism helping people like around the world to liberate themselves and kind of attain wealth, and it is propaganda. So capitalism is an extension of colonialism, in my view, in a historical kind of reading. And so the enemy here, right, is not buying and selling things. Like we can address that in the future with if we want to kind of transcend wealth and money in the long run. That's not capitalism. Capitalism isn't making something and then selling it and getting some cash and then going and buying something. No, capitalism fundamentally is about hierarchy. It's about the concentration of wealth and power at the top. That's what colonialism is about. That's what capitalism is about. It's all about power, right? So it's all about power. The common denominator between systems of feudalism to capitalism, even before that to master slave, was about exploitation, power, production, and being able to extract power. Power and wealth tied. So like power and wealth are now inextricable. Like they're both they blend together. So a lot of our organizations now, like with a CEO and like you have your C-suite, which are the deputies, and then you have these hierarchies, these pyramid organizations, like reflect some of the most egregious authoritarian regimes in the past. They're like basically run like mafias. They're run like the military. They're run like the church. They're run like religious institutions. The same process of like hierarchy. They're run like authoritarian regimes. Like you have a person in the center, and you have like you dole out responsibility, and they take certain things. So that means the power is kind of like ultimate power is at the very top. Now some corporations are a little bit more advanced. There's like some trickle of decision making capacity that kind of is diffused. Complexity add to it is a distraction. So the more complex the system is, the more we're distracted to it, and the more we believe in the system, right? So like going back to what we were saying. So now we have like the enemy here is hierarchy, right? For me, right? I've decided in my DEI practice that every intervention that I've been doing requires a lot of energy and a lot of sustained energy to be able to continue the process of like better outcomes for groups that have traditionally not been a part of the conversation or not been a part of this system over time, right? It's sustained energy. They're Band-Aids. They're like, temporary, transient, fleeting solutions. Eventually the hierarchy wins, the system wins, right? Even if you have what we will call a benevolent dictatorship in your organization where the CEO is a King Arthur or like, somebody very nice at the top, like a benevolent king, right? In your even like that cannot sustain forever, right? This person has immense power, immense responsibility, immense stress, immense like a lot of things. And eventually there's some authoritarian tendencies will come out, right? And the system will win. The structure you've created will win out, right? And by the way, I'm deliberately trying to use accessible language. Like I'm trying to take hundreds of years of philosophical knowledge and trying to basically, because I believe that knowledge is accessible. So if I do say something that is kind of like, undefined or anything like that, please let me know in the chat and I'll try and kind of delve into it. But the enemy here is this hierarchy, right? Feudalism, colonialism, like capitalism, like imperialism, all of them are hierarchical structures of complexity. So what we have to do, and I encourage all DEI practitioners to look at how power is distributed in your organizations and society, right? That is the fundament. That is equity and justice. That is where we should be leading. Otherwise, everything else is going to be a Band-Aid or a fleeting transaction for a DEI program. You'll make your money. You'll move on. They may make some gains here and there, but they'll always revert back to who holds power. And even if, last thing I'll say before I kind of go into the to-do, even if certain groups end up at the top, right? Like we have more representation of X group that we never had at the top, right? The system is still going to win, right? Obviously, if you have representation, you're going to make it a little bit better for people like you. But essentially, you're just still swapping out who controls the levers of power, right? So people of your background will still get harmed. No matter what.
So why don't people before you get into that piece, I want to understand just thoughts around what makes people. Is it a fantasy mind that we have that we think if we just follow the rules of the meritocracy that we're going to be in that, 0.00001% that they're going to allow in? But don't we understand and realize that if we do get there and go there, we're still going to have to sacrifice, right? Because to your point, right, the house always wins. The enemy is the hierarchy. So even if a person were to get, a person that's been historically excluded or underrepresented, right? Intentionally, but historically gets even to a position, they're not going to be allowed to bring in 50 other people that look like them.
Right. Yeah,
if you get a job as the chief, diversity officer reporting to the CEO of this 10,000 person company X, they're not going to let you bring in 72 Vondas 43 Tamikas, 72 Anwars, and a couple of Shrinis. They're not going to let that happen.
Right. Yeah. So thank you for bringing that up. That's a point that I missed, is that if the system is if you're swimming in white supremacy and racial capitalism and heteronormativity, heteropatriarchy, all of these like ableist systems, and you're even like gung ho. I have a justice mindset. I'm going in. I'm going to change things. You're one person. This is the pressure release valve. You made it, and you sit there, and you are diversity, right? Like that's diversity, right? That's not representation. You're not like representing your specific group and being able to kind of enact change. So so that's that pressure release valve. Like but you have a place, a place predetermined by those who control the system and history to be that. And as soon as you start, what they believe is stepping out of line about the rules that they've created, then you're a pariah. You're out. This is not what we envisioned in the job description, which is another way of formalizing and codifying oppression, right? Sometimes. So like the job description literally will lay out what you're supposed to be doing. And so you go into the position like, well, you know what, this isn't doing much change. Like this is I'm focusing on outreach and this and that. And, I bring people in and, then after a few months they leave. There's a mass attrition because of people of color, because of like the system is designed poorly, and the system is designed to benefit white values and white structures of what's good and what's not, right? Like literally like moralities based on whiteness. So yeah, that's a great point. Like even if you have that revolutionary mindset and go and are at the top, somehow make it to chief diversity officer, you're not going to have the power to enact change. You are a single person. And this is why this is so important for distributive power, class consciousness. It's important for people to recognize the power of solidarity and masses, right? Like they continue to create propaganda at the top, so we don't have this, because that is their biggest fear, because they know that if we all kind of understand the situation that we're in, if we realize the power of our own labor and take ownership of our own labor and not have somebody else own our labor and our identities, right? Then that is powerful, because there's a lot of us, right? There's a lot, like, a lot more of us who are trying to kind of reach the top in this rat race than there are at the top. And so so that's important to note, right? Like so then comes to the point of like the enemies, the hierarchy, right? Like the system's the enemy, right? Like those benefiting from the systems, yeah, they get corrupted, and like they turn into, Google's "don't be evil" becomes evil, right? Like, so like those kinds of things will always happen. Power corrupts no matter what, no matter who you are, power will eventually corrupt you. It's time, and it's like power will, So what do we do? So the next logical step is how do we make sure that no one person has the ability to make decisions for entire systems or groups of people, or like because once you give power to somebody, you give power to what they know and also what they don't know. You give power to their biases. You give power to their specific values and their morality. No matter how open they are to listening, it is inherently designed for things to go through their viewpoint and their lens, no matter how. And like there's research to show that people cannot perceive objective morality. It is like impossible in the human mind. Every human, no matter how enlightened you are, you still view things through a subjective morality. It is filtered through a lot of your experiences and your ideologies and everything like that. So the logical thing is, when you're creating decisions, you're making decisions not to rely on the good faith of that one individual. It's to rely on a group to, you're checking biases, not through like your own mind and okay, I got to sit here and I got to be like, am I making a racist, hiring choice? Unless, the counteraction to that is not like, hey, let's train this person. Yeah, that might have some temporary outcomes, but a better response is a collective decision, right? You set the hiring qualifications, the absolute minimum. You set a very simple, non-culture focused set of qualifications that you need to perform this duty, and then you have multiple eyes, and then you have open dialogue to like you check biases that way. That is the only, and the organization should be run that way. That is the only way. Like I will teach DEI concepts to hierarchical organizations. If that's what you want, fine. But like, I'm still going to be like, look, at the end of the day, if you really want better outcomes for your entire population, and this is shown in research, there's less attrition in flat organizations, and not just culturally flat. I'm talking about structurally flat, where decisions are done in circles or in representative bodies or any type of there's a number of different ways of distributing decision-making power and wealth, actually. And that's another thing. You have to distribute the rewards. You have to distribute the wealth not redistribute. I'm not talking about like, oh yeah, let's take taxes from the top and then bring it back and no, I'm talking about distribute on the front end, right? To make it, because like the average CEO salary is like 320 times their, the individual contributor. That's absurd, right? Nobody works enough to make no amount of labor is worth billions upon billions of dollars. Like that is
none. I think they're getting paid on their good looks and, whatever their parents told them was great about them. Right. I think that's what they think they deserve to get paid about that. Right. Because, right. I mean, like you could think about people who have been in high positions in this country as an example, that person that have no skills, right. Except for being a huckster and a grifter and a clown. Right. But that's what we value. So this is just so, there's so much here, right? And there's so many ways people need to think about it. What I want, as we got about 7 minutes or so, as you are thinking through that kind of, part, say a little bit about, hey, you too loud. Say a little bit about what does that actually look like in an organization, right? So we said it looks flat, but how would an organization or how would people within an organization, if they really think there may be a few benevolent kings, right? Or whatever up there, if you're already part of an organization, maybe give a couple of ways, to think about using your collective power internal, right? Like what would have happened if Amazon would have worked out, right? What that collective kind of power situation would have looked like. But then since we know that trying to do that within those systems is extremely challenging, right? What can we do to start creating these systems, right, outside of what currently exists, right? Because the amount of pushback that we would get, right, from these systems is going to be tremendous, right? Because you can see what that is, even when you take back to how we started the conversation, right? Talking about, LinkedIn or these other social media platforms, right? And how they choose to use those algorithms to shut down anti-propaganda. So, take a couple minutes, and kind of, talk through, some of that, right. To kind of think about those captures for us, as we want to take it away.
Yeah. So there's no simple answer to that. Like you're going to get resistance and that's what's going to happen. And you might, it might end up costing you. I don't want to kind of tell you to take a revolutionary approach to anything when you have, first off, like you have families to feed and things like that. Like, look out for you first off, right? Like, you may learn to become aware to your surroundings, but you still have to eat. You still have to live in a capitalist society, right? So make sure that, I'm not trying to tell everybody go out there and just burn it all down kind of thing, right? Make sure it's a measured approach. Second thing, I want every DEI practitioner to pay attention to, or anybody actually, to pay attention to the cooperative space, to the worker-owned space. It is growing. Union penetration and union membership in this country is extremely low, but there are a lot of organizations that are popping up that have developed models of distributive power, and that can include, a friend of mine, Ted Rao, who teaches about sociocracy. That's one particular way of doing it. There's multiple ways of distributing decision-making within an organization. Project Equity out of Chicago, what they do is they help organizations kind of secure financing and then help them transition into workers getting the capital to buy out their companies. And mostly like production based, mostly not services, but but they're doing that in Basque Country, in the Netherlands. All of these like shared power frameworks are popping up where like most of like the duties are kind of distributed, and if there's a need for a very specific specialized role, they'll hire that separately, right? That's a separate position but there's only a few of them. Middle management is gone, hierarchy is gone. Everybody has power. Everyone's distributing wealth according to what they put in. There's a lot of models. And that comes to the final thing is like, if you're trying and you're facing resistance, you're obviously going to present this to your CEO. He's going to be like, no, this is my company. I built this, blah, blah, blah. Of course, right? It's like a lot of companies are moving toward what they call being culturally flat, which is, I believe, is like another kind of Band-Aid issue. They may have some positive outcomes where it's distributed, but most of the time, distributive in decision-making, most of the time, the wealth does not distribute, right? You have to distribute the material gain of your organization for this to particularly work. And so, so what I suggest is like, hey, if it's not working for you and you don't like this hierarchy, like we as a collective have to develop those structures. We then form our own cooperatives. We form our own employee-owned, worker-owned structures, our companies, our even nonprofits, right? Like are extremely based on capitalist culture and this hierarchy. So like where there is resistance, there is an opportunity to create a parallel, And I will say there's a lot of research. A friend of mine, Paul, he talked about, recently told me about this company out of Basque Country called K2K that helps organizations kind of develop these to transition into shared power and cooperatives and employee-owned labor and that kind of thing. Mondragon Corporation out of Spain does, and Dr. Richard Wolff of Democracy at Work talks a lot about this, that specific organization. They're doing great. Attrition is low. People aren't leaving them because one, you have the power to make decisions, and then because you have a stake in the outcome, the greater the production, the better the company's doing. You feel good because you're getting paid for it, and you get to define your schedule and you get to define how you show up to work in your labor. Why would you ever leave that, right? It's automatically built in that once you create that foundation, you're going to have better DEI outcomes because first off, you're not empowering anybody. Nobody's giving you power. Power is already distributed, right? Like you have the power to show up as you would like in the workplace. The last thing I'll say is that, the reason why I'm saying DEI practitioners to kind of get into this is that those mechanisms do not erase the need for DEI. There will be remnants of old systems that show up in the new systems, racism and sexism, classism, all those things. Classism will kind of dissipate and eventually change, but these ideological systems will show up. And that's where the DEI practitioner comes. I believe it's much easier for the DEI practitioner to operate in these cooperative systems where power, wealth, and decision-making is distributed. So it's better for the industry. So
I love this. This was literally, so we definitely have to have more of this conversation. And Ted Rao, who you mentioned, is one of the people that I'm so interested to talk to him all day, because one thing that I love is, so I think I've shared with people, I'm 52, And so one thing that I have noticed and learned is people my age and up, we just have a lot of entrenched old ideas, right? And ways that we have, because we've been so conditioned, right, to fit in, right, to the capitalistic framework and to not buck the system, right, in any way, like not, it's hard, I think, for my generation and up to wrap their minds right around these concepts. So I want to continue to bring these concepts out because, to Jahari's point, to your point, we have to reestablish and create, a new pedagogy around propaganda and around truth and around capitalism and around politics, and recognize that there is no separation, right, of politics and business. Literally, business determines the politics. Literally, all the CEOs tell the politicians what to do and pay the money to do it, and then the politicians do it. So literally, why we say politics and business don't literally is stupid. So I've never been one to accept that argument. But anyway, we could talk literally for hours. I think we need to figure out how to do like a series, on these systems and kind of like help people think through, how to actually do it where you are, but from the standpoint of, hey, if you have ideas, right, that are going to drive equity, inclusion, wellness, better climate, if you have that, right, then here's some ways that you could start thinking about forming your own organization, your own your own startup, your own entity to do these things, right, to create these outcomes that we all know, right, that are better for all of us. So it's 1 minute after. I just have to say thank you so much. I'm looking forward to just continuing to have these conversations. And for everybody, if you get a chance, tune in later today at 5 p.m. Central, kicking off another new discussion series. But I will see you next Saturday. So thanks so much for joining the new group chat, Radical Change with Vonda Page. And I will see everyone soon. Thanks again.